Again, we have a new minor today to learn. Oh, a lot of noise in the background over there. Let's take care of that noise. Okay, so we have, as I said, a new mimer in Tafshin Mem Beis. It's entitled "Valihudim Hoisa Oida V'Simcha V'Sas." We cut that we know at the end of the Megillah, we say the pasuk that the Yidden had light, had joy, and had happiness, or happiness and joy, however we translate the words simcha and sasin, v'yikar, and glory. So Chazal explained this. Pirshur Chazal, Oida zu Torah. Oida goes on Torah because it says that the Torah is called Oir. V'simcha zayamtiv. Simcha zayamtiv, like it says, Samachta Chagecha. You rejoice in your Yom Tov. The Sasan is of Milah. Sasan is going on Milah because it says in Tehillim that David HaMelech said, Sasan Meichi al Imrasecha. This was when he wasn't able to perform any mitzvahs because he was in the bathhouse. He was rejoicing the fact that he always had with him this one mitzvah, the mitzvah of Bris Milah. Yikar Elu Tefillin, and the glory, the thing that gives the person adornment, and it's called Pe'er al Roishcha, it's called the beauty and the glory upon your head. It's like a crown. Is the level of film that's called Yikar. So the Rebbe asked, but Tzarech Lahavim, we need to understand, Yikar, I was saying, Nusiyim, like the way the Rabbeim, Nusiyim, examined this, like Bishad Marazakin, starting from Alter Rebbe, like Bishad Maramtzoi, the Middler Rebbe, like just Admor Tzemach Tzedek, Tzemach Tzedek's questions on this, on Nusiyim Shala Achrize, and the Rabbeim following this. Why was it emphasized in this pasuk that the Yidden had this oida v'simcha? In other words, it could have said there was oida v'simcha, and obviously, who was rejoicing, who was happy, was the Yidden that were happy. Why is the emphasis Yehudim, specifically Yehudim ha'isayir? From the simple reading of the psukim, from the simple context, it would have been self-understood that what we're speaking about is the Yid. The fact that it does start off with the word La Yehudim, so it's understood from this. That these things, the four things that he enumerates over here, Torah, Yom Tov, the Bris Milah, and Tefillin have a special connection with the Yidden, but not just the Yidden in general, but when they are specifically on the level that's denoted by the name Yehudim. Just like we know in many other Amorich Chassidus that the terms Yisrael and Yaakov, for example, denote different levels and denote different types of avodah and so on. The same thing when we talk about the name Yehudi. Yehudi indicates a specific type of service, a specific type of connection that he didn't have with the Eibishter, and that, whatever that characteristic of Yehudi is, that is specifically expressed in these four mitzvahs of Torah, Yom Tov, Milah, and Tefillin. It says, we need to understand the reason behind it. What is it exactly about the connection between these two things? Also, we need to understand, according to what the Chazal explained, that Oida that's going on Torah. And so to the pasuk says, that's the Chazal say as a proof for it. So you see that Torah is associated with light. So since the support for this is the pasuk that says Torah is light, so shouldn't we use the form and the way how the pasuk uses it? If so, then the pasuk should have written that the Yidden had light, lashon zacher, in the masculine form. Like the language used in the pasuk that says Torah was light, using the masculine form for light, oir. Why does it say like Yehudim haisa oira? using the feminine form for light if we're referring to the Torah, which the pasuk uses the masculine form for light, or when it comes to Torah. So that is one question. But a different question is the Lafi Pirush Chazal. According to what the Chazal explained, Yuksha b'Yoser Madun Nikram Yisrael b'Pasuk Zebishem Yehudim Dafke will be even more difficult to understand why Ayidin called in this pasuk specifically Yehudim. That this indicates that these matters are specifically associated with the level of Yehudim, like we said before. But it called in Yonim Elu a mitzvahs esem in Torah. Torah study, Bris Milah, Yom Tov, Tefillin, these are all mitzvahs that we have in Torah. Limud Torah, the study of Torah, Simchas Yom Tov, the joy of Yom Tov and Milah with Tefillin. Not only that, but V'hukshakal Torah, the entire Torah was compared to Tefillin. Ub'Torah Sheba mitzvahs asset in the actual 5 Chamisha Chumshei Torah, that over there is located all the positive commandments, all the 613 mitzvahs, including these 4 mitzvahs, are written in Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Adayin lo nikru Yisrael b'shem v'dargis Yehudim. That the Yidden were not yet called by this name, the level of Yehudim. The Torah Zen Nimtza Rak Megillas Esther. This description is only found later on in Megillas Esther. Shenitna Kama v'Kama Toiras Achreish Yisrael Kvar Kiyumas Kol HaMitzvahs. That was given many generations after the Yidden fulfilled all the mitzvahs. Ubetoichem Asa Mitzvah Nal, amongst them these mitzvahs, Torah, Yom Tov, Milah, Tefillin. So therefore, the question is, how we associate these 4 mitzvahs with whatever level, which we haven't yet explained, is the level of Yehudim, when these mitzvahs were given prior to this level even being explored and revealed, that the Yidden were called Yisrael in the Torah, and then the mitzvahs were given to them. So how do we associate it specifically with the level of Yehudim? Let's learn a little bit further. The point of the explanation in all of this, Hegdim Abir, the first prefacing the explanation, why specifically over here is Torah used in the feminine? We call it Oira, feminine form of light, Lashon Akeva, and not the masculine form of light. And based on this, we'll be able to explain the other questions. The idea behind this is the Torah, there's 2 levels, Bechinas Torah, Oira, Bechinas Oira. There's the level of Torah, Oira, and there's a level of Oira. Bechinas Oira, Yesh ba beis pirushim haf. Actually, in the word Oira itself, there are 2 opposite explanations and meanings. Pirush Echad, one explanation of Oira is the Oira hu lashon mafil. Oira is something that affects and makes and causes. Like the expression used by the Mittler Rebbe, this is something that brings about that there should be light. The Bechinas Makir HaOir, the source of light, it is the source that brings out the level of Torah oil that we said, like we're going to say later on. In modern Hebrew, people might be familiar with the term te'ura, if I have that term correctly. The same thing, the Mittler Rebbe explains, oira is in a similar sense used and can be used to mean the source from which light comes from. So there's the oir, and there's the oira, which is the source of the oir. That is one explanation of oira. Oira is so high, it's the source from which oira is derived from. On the other hand, since it is feminine, we're soon going to explain just the opposite. Instead of it being the source of oir, it's actually at the receiving end of the oir. Say Pirish Bey is the oira lashon akeva. The second meaning of oira is that oira isn't feminine. Shuhu bechinas oira makabel. the level of saying that something is feminine is the difference between the zachar and the nekeva, between the masculine and the feminine. Is the masculine is the mashpia, is the one who gives. The feminine is the receiver, the makabel. So oira in this other explanation is, instead of being the source, it's rather the receiver of it. It is the one that receives from the oir of the Torah, or the Torah oir level, which is the masculine. So therefore, being that so that's what he points out, that there's these two opposite things. Is it the mashpia, or is it the mekabel? Is it the source of oil, or is it receiving from oil? Then the Rebbe goes on and says, say Yuvan Gam B'Shar Ha'inyan Pasuk. This is also understood in the rest of the matters here in this pasuk. Shagam Bahem Yesh Beis Bechinas. That also in all of these things, in Simcha, in Sasna, Yikar, in Yom Tov, in Milah, in Tefillin, there's also two levels in each one of them. Okefishi is Bar Lakama, as the Rebbe will go on to explain the Maimer further. Any questions before we go on? Who the explanation of this matter is in Amr Hazal. The Chazal said, that which is falls off, noivel is something that falls off the tree, something that becomes completely like used up or whatever. So that which falls off from the chachma of above, that is Torah. Hainusha Torah, that means the Torah, the way we know the Torah, is only that which falls and is lower and is a descent from the level of chachma above. Similar to this explained in the Arizal's writing. The reason why does the Torah begin with the letter base? Base indicates the concept, the first level, it's the first letter of the word Bria. Because the Torah, the way we perceive it, is the Torah of Bria. Higher than this, Yesh Torah Atzilus, there's the Torah of Atzilus. That's the Aleph, but the Torah doesn't begin with an Aleph, indicating that it's already a lesser form. It's already a level that already came down very low. The Spheres, when we divide these two levels in Spheres, the Torah of Bria versus the Torah of Atzilus, or the Torah with the letter Beis, or the Torah down here versus the Chachma above. So when we divide it in Spheres, is Yesh Bechinas HaTorah Hashiyachos Spheres HaChachma. There's a level of Torah that's connected and associated with Spheres HaChachma. Let's skip the parentheses. Yesh Bechinas HaTorah Shalom Mailam is Spheres HaChachma. And there's a level of Torah that's beyond the Spheres HaChachma. That level of Spheres HaChachma that's connected to is, in the way, going back to the parentheses, at least its connection with Chachma is that it's considered something that fell from Chachma. But then there's a level of Torah that's beyond even Chachma. Just like in our intellect down here below, there is the power of maskil. That maskil power is the cause and the source of intellect. Again, I've seen it translated by Matis Cantor as he calls it the ideal well. That's the source of intellect, and it makes the intellect work. That is the level of, that corresponds to the level of Torah beyond Chachma, whereas Chachma is the level of Seichel itself. The first explanation in Oida, that Oida is going on something that is making and creating something else. That's the level, or causing the light to come out. That's the source of Torah. That's the level of Torah that's high in Chachma, corresponding to our level of Koyach HaMaskil. The Inyan Zeh, and this higher level of Torah, connected with the second explanation. of the word oida. That's said in the feminine. In a Kabbalah, that the second meaning of oida means that it's receiving. When do we tap in to the source of Torah, to the level of Oira that's higher than Oir? Only by having Oira that receives from Oir. When we have the receiving part of Torah, when Torah is being received and it permeates, then we tap into that higher level. This is similar, not exact, like we say concerning Metalmida Yoser Mikulam, that when a person teaches to the student, so then when it comes absorbed and taken in by the student, etc., that causes a greater and deeper level of enjoyment and a greater, deeper level of understanding to come out, and so on. But say you've in the last paragraph on this page, well, this will be understood. Why specifically in the Megillah is it called Oira? Indicating this type of relationship that when it's received by the Makabel, so then it taps into the source of Torah that's higher. The Chazal said on the pasuk that the Yidden fulfilled and accepted. What does it mean, fulfilled and accepted? I guess part of the question also is, shouldn't have been the other way around. They accepted and then they fulfilled. Why does it say first fulfilled and then accepted? So the Chazal say that now, during the time of Purim, they fulfilled what they already accepted prior during Matan Torah. Explain the B'Shas Matan Torah Kaf Aleim Akadosh Baruch Aleim is a Harkegigis Kulu, as it's known. During Matan Torah, Hashem put the mountain over the head of the Yid, as if holding a barrel over their head, and he coerced them to accept the Torah. From here, there is a great protest against the Torah. Maidah is a halachic term used that if someone is coerced into making a sale, so then he can go to Bezdin and he is Meiser Maidah. He lodges a protest, or he lodges a complaint indicating that though the sale was made fully documented, etc., that the sale was done under duress, it was made under coercion. So the same thing, this story that the Chazal say that the Torah was like coerced upon us, that it's Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis, that Hashem held a mountain over our head, is a Maidah Rabbah. It's a great protest for the Torah. We have a reason, if you will, in like indicated in law, that we're not responsible. Dafka b'mei Achashverosh, top of the next page, only specifically in the days of Achashverosh, they then again accepted it out of their good will, meaning out of their own will, out of their free will. The Oz Paulus Kiyama Inyan, then they affected the existence of the thing. They gave strength to the deal that we made with Hashem. They gave strength that it should be in such a type of way that the Torah was not just something that was given to us, under duress and coercion, which therefore questions the relationship and the commitment, but rather it was solidified. It had now a kiyum to the Kabbalah Torah that we did by Har Sinai, now has a kiyum, meaning that it was solidified. Like, for example, kiyum in the simple sense. There's a term in Chazal, monetary term that's used, called kiyum shtaris. When a person takes a document, a contract to Bezdin, to prove validity, so then to be able to prove that validity, you have to bring witnesses to Bezdin that testify that they either recognize the handwriting of the witnesses on the document, or you actually bring the witnesses. This is that actually signed a document. That is called kiyum shtaris. So the word kiyum means when you're finally solidifying something. And the Chazal say, the Rebbe always says that when you're mekayim a shtar, when you make a kiyum on a shtar, that's much more powerful than the shtar before it was validated by Bez. That it adds power and strength in the matter that's becoming verified. And that's the same thing that happened by the time of Achashverosh, that by the Yidden taking on this type of concept, this type of level, but then they affected the idea of a stronger like connection with the Torah than they had before. That from now on, from the times of Achashverosh and on, there's no more protest, there's no more challenge, and therefore there's no problem about coercion and duress. This is a complete and a whole deal. Now the Rebbe goes on to say in the third line, now it's understood why the Torah is called in the Megillah specifically by the term Oiram. The way the Torah was given from above by Matan Torah, so then it's in a level of only Torah Oir. In other words, it doesn't have the great power of the Oira in the first meaning, that is the source of Torah. It's only the level of Torah being Noivlos Chachma Shel Maila, only having to do with the level of Chachma, not higher than Chachma, only having to do with the level of the world of Bria, not higher than that. Because the way the Torah was given from above, from Hashem's perspective, wasn't so much our acceptance and receiving. It's only the level of Torah that we said that's Noivlos Chachma Shel Maila. It's only the lower level. It's only the level of the base of Torah, Bria. It's only the level of Chachma, not higher than Chachma. Through the verification and solidifying and the acceptance in the times of Achashverosh, that is the idea of Oida, said in the feminine form, indicating that that was the idea of a receiver. It was being received now, as opposed to coming from above, just the mashpia, just the Eibishter giving it to us. Through that, they drew down from the level of Oida that's higher than the level of Oida, because Oida is only that middle ground. The canal, as we said before, through the verification, through the kiyum, that adds in the power of the thing. So the Oida as feminine brings down the Oida as the source of light, as the maskal, as beyond Chachma. Only when we had us being the feminine, accepting the Torah on our terms, not being coerced, then we reached into ultimate level of Torah, higher than what we Matan Torah. With the level of Bechinas Oida Loshem Mafil, we tapped into the level of Oida in the way that it's the cause of light, Shumakara, or the source of life. That is the avoid of a person. That's the idea of the Torah by the power of the person down here below. By the person down here receiving and accepting the Torah on his power, on his strength, not because it was given from above, but because of his commitment to Torah. So then that awakens the level of Mesiras Nefesh. And Mesiras Nefesh is something that's higher than Torah. Therefore, in Torah, there is no reason for offering up one's life for the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, to such a degree that in a way it goes against the logic of Torah. If one would look at the logic of Torah, we know Chalal of Shabbos Achas, Kadesh Yishmar Shabbos Harbe, that a person, let's say, transgresses one Shabbos, so he should continue observing many Shabbosim afterwards. So the same idea could be said in any case of Mesiras Nefesh. When a person is told, bow down to Avodah Zarah, and he would bow down, so fine, he would bow down that time, and then he would return to Torah later on. That would seemingly logic, and even the logic of Torah itself seemingly would indicate that a person should make that choice. But the reason why a person is Meiser Nefesh has nothing to do with Torah itself, and it's not explained in Torah. And in other Mamorim, the Rebbe says that it's not even explicitly stated in Torah. It's derived, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem is derived from the pasuk, "V'nikdashti b'sof b'nei Yisrael." I should become sanctified amongst the Bnei Yisrael. But there's no explicit statement in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah where it talks about different mitzvahs, that if a person, Chas v'sholom, threatens you, bow down to Avodah Zarah, or Chas v'sholom, I'll take the person's life, there's no explicit statement in the Torah that a person has to forfeit his life for that. So Torah is not somewhere that the idea of Mesiras Nefesh is really explored, because Mesiras Nefesh comes from a source that's higher than Torah. And in the person as well, it doesn't come from his logic. It doesn't come, like the Rebbe says in other places, when a person is willing to give up his life in a way of Mesiras Nefesh, it's not such a thing that he looks into Shulchan Aruch and he says, well, Shulchan Aruch says I should give up my life, da 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 da. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Like it says in Perek Yudches, Yutas and Tanya, it doesn't make a difference how learned or how not learned the person is. Doesn't make a difference his gender, doesn't make a difference his age. There's an automatic knee-jerk reaction to not submit to Avodah Zarah, for example, to be willing to give up one's life for Avodah Zarah. Why? Because not coming from the Torah part. Because the Mesiras Nefesh of a Yid comes from the essence of the soul beyond the level of Torah. That's the idea that through all the Yidden, from young to elderly, small children and women, they stood the entire year in a state of self-sacrifice. Like we know that the Gzeira of Haman went out in the Pesach time, Sivan time of the year, Pesach time of the year before, and the battle against the anti-Semites was a year later. So they were entire year, they were in a state of Mesiras Nefesh. Also, Alter Rebbe says that they didn't even consider an outside thought. In other words, they didn't even consider somehow giving up their identity and joining the other nations and serving Avodah Zarah to be able to save their lives. And this is something that I think the Rebbe mentions it, that only like the Alter Rebbe could say, because how do we know what's going on in their minds? But the Alter Rebbe says that's the case. Days of Paul was Akim B'Torah, through their Mesiras Nefesh, through their self-sacrifice, which comes from a place that's higher. So they affected a kiyum, a strengthening. We gave a strength to the Torah that wasn't there on its own. We drew down from the Oida of Torah, which is the source of the light of Torah. Now it's understood why Yidden are called in this pasuk by the title and the name Yehudim specifically, because Yehudim has to do with this idea of Mesiras Nefesh. Because the drawing down of the self-sacrifice is through the drawing down of the level of Oida, the source of Torah, is through the fact that they were a level of Yehudim. The Yehudi who called Mishamoida B'Chala Torah Kula V'Kaifer Avodah Zarah, who is called a Yehudi is someone that accepts and admits in the entire Torah, and he denies Avodah Zarah. The service and the power of the one down below in a complete acceptance of Hashem, even to the degree where it involves self-sacrifice. That self-sacrifice of being a Yehudi tapped into the utmost highest level of Oida being the source of Torah, and that being brought down in Torah in the highest way.